Hi, Saturday, October 25th, and we're tracking Hurricane Melissa in the Central Caribbean this evening. The system is now intensified into a hurricane this afternoon and is now likely getting close to a rapid intensification phase as we head into tonight into the day on Sunday. And you can see some of these deeper convective bursts that we have now going on over the center of the storm. Since my last video, the system has been taking a bit of time to try and close off the eye wall, but also make the winds more concentrated around the system center and more symmetric. We talked about yesterday how the wind field, when Recon was measuring it, was fairly spread out. It wasn't compact to what a normal hurricane looks like, where all the strongest winds are near the core. What we've seen today is the winds have now concentrated more near the system center, and in microwave passes from the little that we've got today, we've seen progression to get towards a closed eye and eye wall structure, which has also been noted on recon data from earlier today. This is a microwave pass from earlier this morning, and you can see this kind of half eye wall by this point that was in place. Now, we have not been as fortunate as we were yesterday. We don't have too much microwave imagery that is directly passed over the storm. The best we have is this one from a couple of hours ago, and it paints a similar picture. Presumably, it has a very similar half eye wall like this, struggling still to close off on the northern side, at least on this pass. Perhaps an effect of some northerly mid-level shear that we talked about being in place yesterday. However, if we look at visible imagery as the sun starts to set, we now have this very deep convective burst wrapping around the system's center now. And this was happening right after this microwave pass. So that might be now closing off that northern side of the eye wall. Now, the good news is we have a couple of recon planes flying out there right now, and they'll be investigating the storm throughout the evening hours and seeing exactly how the structure is progressing. But regardless, with all these trends, the system is now likely getting close to the first phase of rapid intensification, and that has been well advertised by hurricane models. The general expectation was it spent the day today getting itself organized and set up to rapidly intensify, and we're probably going to start to see it rapidly intensify overnight tonight. We can see this progression happen if we look at the HAFS model. You can see after this afternoon, still a minimal hurricane on the model as it tries to finish off that eye wall and get the winds more symmetric still around the system center. But as we get that done, you'll see that by overnight, this is by 2 a.m. on Sunday, now we've got the eye wall built, and now we're getting towards category 2 intensity on this forecast. And pay attention to this red number in the middle. It starts to decrease at a much more rapid pace down below 960 and below 950 by 5 p.m. local time on Sunday. And this will be a rapid intensification event that would likely lead the system into category 4 or category 5 intensity once it completes this. And that is a general consensus from other hurricane models like the HWRF, the HMON, and the HAFS-B. The one I'm showing you here is the HAFS-A model. And after it initially peaks, there may be a bit of a phase of where it oscillates a little bit with intensity. There may be an eye wall replacement cycle that takes shape. The HAFS models especially have been trying to show that, and those are difficult to predict, but storms, when they peak at their first time, can be a little bit more unstable. And especially if we have a smaller eye at first peak, that may mean that the eye of Melissa is a little bit unstable. So we may see an eye replacement cycle happen in fairly short order. Now, I mentioned this because it's important not to get caught into the exact details of what the winds are doing over the next few days, as when you get to these thresholds of category 4 and category 5, oftentimes the winds do begin to oscillate some. So there may be periods where it's strengthening, there may be periods where you see it's weakening. However, it's likely to remain a very powerful hurricane for the next several days, and it's likely to gain size as it makes the turn towards Jamaica. So those eye wall replacement cycles are a bit misleading. They do decrease the winds a little bit, but the reason they decrease in winds is because the storm size is growing, so it's taking over a greater surface area. And even with that, if conditions are favorable after, which they will be in all likelihood, for Melissa, the winds can come right back up after a replacement cycle happens. So we'll see on this model, the hurricane force wind field in purple does grow some in size, and that would mean that Jamaica may see a lot of areas getting hurricane force wind field, even if the core does not make landfall in one specific spot. In Jamaica, so even southwestern Jamaica, we could still get that hurricane force wind field rather close. And of course, with a larger wind field, that means the storm is pushing more and more water on shore, so that may lead to an even worse storm surge onto what we're already expecting, which could be exceeding 10 feet. in storm surge, which could be catastrophic along the coastline, alongside the heavy rainfall we're expecting as well. Now, after Jamaica, the system is going to be turning to the north, and the reason for this is a new trough that's over the southeastern United States. It's breaking down the eastern half of a ridge that's currently in place over the western Atlantic. This ridge is what's responsible for tracking the system to the west today. But as that ridge breaks down, the system will begin to turn towards the north, and this is a high confidence idea. Now, the exact details on exactly when this turn occurs, still a little murky, and those are typical even in short range, as hurricanes can wobble sometimes with their center track. And that could mean you get the system to wobble here where it makes landfall in eastern Jamaica or western Jamaica. So those fine details will still need to be ironed out for the next few days. But regardless, with that turn, there is very high confidence that Jamaica will receive a direct hit, likely from a very intense hurricane. And once it passes through Jamaica, we'll see the system get very close to eastern Cuba. You'll also note that the system does gain size as well. As the system interacts with land, it also tends to gain size, and that will broaden out the hurricane force wind field. So we may see a large region in eastern Cuba deal with strong tropical storm to hurricane force winds as it comes through. And note that the tropical storm force wind field is also pretty expansive here on the eastern side, even seeing tropical storm force winds occur in western Haiti, and that will be the same case with rainfall. We could see some strong outer bands come into Haiti, even though we're likely not even going to see any part of the core of the hurricane. So still widespread impacts as the system comes in. Now, there may be an opportunity between landfall in Jamaica and Cuba for it to try and rebound in intensity. We may see it more so level off. I don't know that it'll have much of a chance to really re-intensify, as the system will likely need some time to recuperate itself after making landfall in Jamaica, but it could still be a Category 3 or close to Category 4 hurricane by the time it comes into eastern Cuba. Now, as it passes over Cuba, it will likely weaken pretty substantially. There's quite a bit of high terrain, which will likely disrupt the system quite a bit and cause it to weaken, but a weakened Category 4 may be a large Category 2 by the time it comes into the southeast Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. And that's the general forecast here, is that we have a large hurricane coming through by Tuesday night or Wednesday local time there. And you can see the expansive hurricane force wind field and tropical storm force wind field. Now, the good news for the Turks and Caicos and Bahamas, and as well Cuba, unlike what Jamaica is seeing, this is not going to be as long of a drawn out event. The system will be accelerating as it moves towards the northeast. So you can see by Thursday morning, the system is now well off to the northeast from all of those islands. And by that point, we may be getting close to Bermuda. It's still a little murky onto exactly if we're going to have to deal with any impacts from the storm in Bermuda. That is something to keep in mind, that going towards Halloween, we could be looking at the storm getting very close to the island as it tracks further towards the northeast. And putting all this together, that's the general forecast of the Hurricane Center. And you can see remaining a major hurricane, or becoming a major hurricane rather, tonight, and becoming a very powerful Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane as it begins to make a turn slowly south of Jamaica, making a landfall there around Tuesday morning. This is 2 a.m. Tuesday. The timing has been shifting a little bit on this. The general expectation is by Tuesday, we have the system making landfall over Jamaica, and a hurricane warning is in effect for that reason. And as we move further northeast, we see a hurricane watch now in effect for Cuba, and those watches will likely be expanded further in coming advisories for the Turks and Caicos and southeastern Bahamas. We also still have a tropical storm warning and hurricane watch for southern Haiti. Seems unlikely by this point that we're going to get hurricane force winds, but tropical storm force winds are certainly a possibility, especially with the heavier rain bands that do rotate in from the east. And the impacts of this, unfortunately, are going to likely be catastrophic across Jamaica and Haiti, especially as the system's slow motion for the next few days. You can see it again in the NHC forecast. This is practically a 3-day forecast here. So in 3 days, it hardly moves really relative to Jamaica. And so that means prolonged heavy rainfall will occur across the island. And note that it's not just kept to the center. We do have some westerly shear increasing as the system begins to turn towards the north, and that will mean that a lot of the showers and storms get pushed onto this eastern side. And so again, for Haiti, even though we're not seeing the core come in, we could still easily have strong outer bands, including heavy rainfall and tropical storm force winds, cut across the island. And we may even see tropical storm watches issued for further north portions of the coast as we go in time. We'll have to see exactly how the storm tracks for that detail. But in terms of how much rainfall could fall, unfortunately, on top of what we've already seen in Hispaniola, we could see an additional widespread zone of 100 to 500 millimeters of rainfall, especially in southern Haiti and southern or southwestern Dominican Republic. And in southern Haiti, especially with the high terrain, we could see additional totals exceeding 750 millimeters of rainfall. And that on top of what we've already seen, there's already been a lot of videos coming out of Haiti and Hispaniola as a whole of flash flooding already taking place. And so we're likely not going to get much of a break for the next several days from the rainfall here in Haiti. And I hope everyone stays safe as the system comes through, and hopefully, not too many people lose their lives, as unfortunately water is the #1 killer in hurricanes. So hopefully everybody is prepared for the storm. And for Jamaica, equal amount of rainfall or more expected, especially along the eastern part of the island. You can see there is a pretty sharp gradient from west to east that shows you the effect of that westerly shear as it makes that recurve towards the north. But keep in mind, if the center track does shift a little bit west in the next few days, that could increase rainfall totals across the central and western part of the island. But especially for the eastern part of the island, for areas like Kingston, we could see rainfall getting close to a meter at the end of this thing. And this is going to be absolutely catastrophic. Alongside the strong Category 4 force winds we could see that are catastrophic in nature, we could see catastrophic storm surge exceeding 10 feet along and east of where the center makes landfall. And again, rainfall that could exceed a meter at the end of this thing. So unfortunately, a big disaster on the way for Jamaica, and any preparations that still need to be done need to be rushed to completion tonight, as tropical storm force winds could approach and start hitting the island as early as tonight. Now, moving on to Cuba, we could see very heavy rainfall as well with the high terrain. This forecast has come up because we're now getting in range where the system was probably going to be coming through here. And you can see a widespread swath of 200 to 400 millimeters across the island. And we may even see some localized totals exceed that with all the high terrain. And in the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, not nearly as much, partially because it's not as much high terrain there, but also the storm is accelerating there. But we could still see a broad swath of 100 to 200 millimeters across those islands. And really, I think the bigger issue there is probably going to be storm surge, especially when you have a big hurricane like this. It's going to be able to push a lot of water, and a lot of these islands are very susceptible to the impact of storm surge because they're not landlocked. They feel the full force of hurricane force winds and storm surge. So we may see very significant storm surge, and that may end up being the really big issue here for the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. And again, we'll talk about at a later point the impacts to Bermuda. It is still a little bit murky onto exactly if we get the impacts in Bermuda. Some models take it pretty sharply northeast and keep it southeast of the island. Some are taking it off to the northwest, and that partially depends of a uncertain steering pattern over the United States that has been shifting a lot in model forecasts. So we'll watch that for the next few days for Bermuda. Okay, final thing I want to show you is the earliest reasonable arrival time of tropical storm force winds. Again, for Haiti and Jamaica, tonight is really when they could start approaching and impacting those two areas. And you can see the probability is very high, of course, for those two islands. For eastern Cuba, you've got at the earliest until tomorrow night, more likely Monday morning. So you've got all day on Sunday to finish preparations ahead of the storm. And you've got a couple more days in the Bahamas and southeastern Turks and Caicos, mixing up the words there, but you get what I'm saying here. For across the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, you've got until about Tuesday morning or Tuesday night when tropical storm force winds may start to arrive. So still plenty of time to prepare accordingly ahead of the storm. That's all that I've got for today. Stay safe in Jamaica and Hispaniola and Cuba over the next few days as this hurricane continues through. I'll have more videos on this throughout this weekend and into early next week as it continues intensifying and nears landfall. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.